Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. Now that we've resumed in-person meetings, we encourage people to participate in person. If, however, you would rather submit an online comment, please know that online comments will be accepted until 12 o'clock p.m. on the day of the meeting. Comments may be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website, which is cityofElCajon.us, and look under Agendas and Minutes. The meeting is called to order. I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Kendrick and Council Member Ortiz are absent. All others are present.
I do want to let you know that Councilmember Ortiz is coming. So, all right, would you all please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a brief moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the June 8th, 2021 meeting and the agenda of the June 22nd, 2021 meeting in accordance with state law, council, and housing authority policy. We have two presentations on today's agenda. The first one is regarding fentanyl's impact on the community, and I invite David Shorey, our public manager at the Institute for Public Strategies, to share with us about this issue. Sir, thank you for coming. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor Wells and Councilmember Goebel, Councilmember Metzel, and city staff. So we're talking about an issue that you may have heard in the news recently. The County of San Diego just released some information that I'll be going into, but about the impact that fentanyl is having on our community. So some of these information is a little bit behind on that, but that was because it was released a couple of days ago. So I'll go ahead and get started here. There we go. Just so you know, Institute for Public Strategies, we are the county contracted prevention provider. So we work on prevention activities both in the East region, where I'm focused. We also have the contract for the South region. And you can see that the East region is pretty large. We are an organization that whose mission is to work alongside communities to build power, challenge systems of inequity, protect health, and improve quality of life. So fentanyl, what is it? Fentanyl is the drug that has basically changed the way that overdoses are being looked at these days. You see the penny there. That dose is what is considered a lethal dose, about 2 milligrams or 2,000 micrograms. Generally, it's been manufactured in China and imported through Mexico, making its way across the border. As I said, a small amount can be fatal, and it is often cut into counterfeit prescription pills or other drugs that are sold on the street, and it is now showing up in almost every single street drug, including marijuana. Here's some sobering statistics. Fentanyl deaths you see from the 2000s through 2019. And you'll see that around 2015, 2016, you start seeing an expedited spike in fentanyl deaths. The thought is that maybe perhaps previous to those deaths were occurring from misuse of medication by prescribed medication that was either prescribed to an individual or maybe had been used by someone in the household. But after 2016, 2017, we're seeing deaths occur from use of illegal, basically counterfeit prescription medication as well as on-the-street narcotics. It's getting worse. We saw in 2019 152 deaths. The death estimate was confirmed by the county medical examiner. 457 deaths in 2020. So you can see that this spike is now just getting higher and higher. Breaking it down by months, and I should tell you that the red on there, those were non-confirmed cases as of March of this year. They have subsequently, I believe, been confirmed. But you can see that it is across the board. You see a spike in summer, but generally there's no one time that fentanyl deaths are really occurring. It's not related to any kind of time of year. This is what's kind of disturbing, among many things that are part of this, is that you see the deaths that are occurring are mainly those who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. You do see some teens who have died, and in fact, there have been cases here in San Diego County where a kid has gone to a party. Friend had a prescription, what looked like a prescription medication, maybe a Xanax or some hydrocodone or something. Hey, take your pill. Just relax, have a good time. They take the pill, and they're dead by the next morning. There's 351 males, 106 females, average age 37 years old. And the age range, between 14 and 76. We see that between 2019 and 2020, a continued increase in the deaths, not only, and then percentage-wise, an increase in female deaths. So this is not just a male-only issue, it's across the board. From 2019 to 2020, we saw a 200% increase in fentanyl deaths, 164% increase in male deaths, and 458% death in female deaths. Now, I should tell you that the estimate for 2021 is around 700 deaths. So we're looking to almost doubling what the 2020 death count was. And that's an estimate, so it could be higher. And you see this is the estimates for the beginning months of 2021. You see that there are the numbers, if you compare them to 2020, basically each month is almost double. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, we talked about the numbers, and I want to talk a little bit about, very quickly, things that can be looked at to kind of address this issue. What are the upstream things that we can do to prevent these? What we see is that opioid use for folks is connected with an opioid overdose is sometimes connected with a lot of cultural and racial inequities, social, economic boundaries, and barriers to treatment. And all of these have an impact on the equitable way of addressing the opioid crisis. We see that African Americans and American Indian Alaska Natives have higher incidence of overdose deaths due to synthetic opioids versus the white community. And part of the thing we want to look at is when you work with a community to raise awareness, do it in a way that's culturally sensitive, that also is focused on the message of prevention, that doesn't kind of make the drug issue kind of be something, this is kind of edgy and all this. We want to be with the facts. You want to talk to the community in a way that will be able to, they can hear you. We also know that poverty has an impact on opioid use, and we see that in cases not only in California, in Southern California, San Diego, but also across the United States. And we also want to think about ways to address barriers to treatment, looking at meeting age, race, cultural barriers, targeting low incomes, breaking down barriers to treatment. All of these can have an impact on reducing opioids impact, as well as other drug impacts on our communities. And also reaching out to not only the folks who are at the lower income, but also people who are experiencing homelessness. Councilmember Goebel, you had asked me at a point about how many people have overdosed from fentanyl who were experiencing homelessness. I can tell you that there was a 57% increase from 2019 to 2020. And I had been meaning to get you those numbers, and I will make sure you get those. But I want to put that in so that that's the answer to your question. There's been and I believe it was about 357 people. There's a kind of a nexus here of addressing opioid use and misuse, and that's looking at medically assisted treatment, addressing the whole person, treating the disorder as a disorder and not stigmatizing it, and then looking into behavioral health issues and providing behavioral support. Stigma is a very important thing to bring up, because stigma keeps people from not only getting treatment, but admitting that they have a problem. You're a junkie. You're an addict. You're this. You're that. Those kinds of things we need to remove from our vocabulary and start talking about how to provide structure and access to healthcare resources, and how to change the vocabulary that we use when we're addressing opioid issues. Another thing is a person who goes to a party, uses what they perceive to be a Xanax that's actually maybe an illegal or a counterfeit. It's not prescribed to them, and they die. Are they a criminal, or are they a victim? Many of the folks who've overdosed were first-time users. And most fentanyl overdose victims didn't knowingly purchase a drug that had fentanyl in it. Many were recreational users. In fact, 68% of adult arrestees in a recent study said that they would not knowingly purchase a drug if they knew it contained fentanyl. However, everywhere we're finding counterfeit pills that have fentanyl in them. And you may be wondering why, how is this getting in? Well, you saw how much fentanyl could kill someone. That little amount is easier to smuggle in. It's easier to get in across the border versus a block of cocaine or a block of marijuana, or however even methamphetamine. And as I said, it's being found in every single drug on the street, including marijuana, which is, some people are asking, why would you mix those things? There's the idea of kind of countering your highs or enhancing your highs, and that is something that is out there and is happening. We also want to be aware that when you're dealing with communities who may be impacted by the war on drugs, that having conversations about these things raises an amount of trauma for those communities. And so having those conversations in a trauma-informed way is very important to do. Getting message out to parents and youth. We don't want to spark rebellion or entice. We want to talk about the seriousness of the drug and the impact that it's having. Be realistic, no scare tactics, and understand that experimentation is part of growing up. I'm sure if I asked you all to raise your hands if you experimented with some kind of thing when you were growing up, there would not be a hand that wouldn't be down here. So understand that we as growing up, we try to explore, and sometimes we're given opportunities that aren't so healthy and safe. So I'm going to skip ahead because I know I'm mindful of time. I want to talk a little bit about naloxone or Narcan, which is a medication that you may have seen in the news recently. County now has a standing order. Dr. Wooten has issued an order that if you can go to a county clinic and get a prescription or a dose of Narcan, which reverses the opioid overdose. It can cause sudden withdrawal, but it is not something that you can be dependent on. And has no effect if a opioid is not present. Naloxone can't get you high, and the negative side effects from naloxone are rare, if any. So how does naloxone work? Well, basically, you'll see that the opioid connects with the brain receptors, and the naloxone goes in and knocks it out. It also tends to bind with the receptors so that the opioid can't reconnect. Now, the issue is that if you were to administer Narcan to someone, that does not fix them. It does not remove the overdose. It simply delays the overdose. It impedes the medication is still in their body. And so what needs to happen is that they need to get to a medical professional. They need to go to 911 and get a first responder and be taken and being treated for that overdose event. Everyone should carry naloxone. Naloxone should be as common as a fire extinguisher or a first aid kit now, given the impact that opioids are having on our community, and it is available. And I'm going to pick on Councilmember Goebel, who did attend a presentation I did, and you went and got a prescription for Narcan. You got a dose of Narcan. How easy was it?
Well, it's not a prescription.
Well,
right?
it was a yeah.
Right. I had to watch a 30-minute video from some people at a new path and sign a registration sheet, and I went to their location and picked it up, and now I keep it in my truck in a thermos so it doesn't get heat spoiled. It was really easy.
So it is that easy. You could have it, and remember that given how widespread fentanyl is, there is it could be in anything, and someone you approach on the street could be having an overdose event. Someone who is active in their addiction could be experiencing an overdose event. So having it available is something that is very important, very vital at this point to help prevent overdose deaths. And I think I'm probably over time. So I'm going to just say that anyone can carry Narcan. Under provisions of Assembly Bill 635, individuals permitted to possess and administer naloxone in an emergency and are protected from civil or criminal prosecution. And you can, if you don't want to go to a county clinic, you can go to the Department of Health and the Naloxone Distribution Project, and you can get opioid sent to you. You can also go to a New Path or the Harm Prevention Coalition here locally, and they also distribute naloxone. References, and if anyone would like to contact me for additional information, I know that was a lot of information, and I was trying to get through it to make my 15 minutes count, so I apologize if I went over. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Council, any questions?
I know this may seem really stupid, but can you just... So you're saying that the majority of overdoses are by first-time users?
The majority of the fentanyl overdoses we've seen that are from a counterfeit prescription are first-time users.
Okay. And so what I'd like to know is, and you may not have the answer, and I guess I can do some research, but just off the cuff, do you know if there's any, legislation being set up worldwide to stop China from producing this? I mean, I know that sounds kind of infantile to ask, but, I mean, if China is the one that's producing this, why isn't someone just, putting the kibosh on it?
Well, there are attempts, and I could spend hours talking about that, but we're also seeing a lot of production moving into Mexico, and so some of the original materials that they're finding in China are now moving into Mexico. So the answer to the question is, I know that the feds are working on addressing that. Fentanyl in and of itself is a medication. It's used for proper purposes. The problem is that it's now being taken and used for illicit purposes.
Okay. And if I contact you, can you, because what I'd like to find out is when you talk about inequities and justice, and like, I need more information
Sure.
on that, because I just don't understand. I just don't understand how that, if it affects a community, it affects a community, and I don't understand how the inequity or the justice comes in. So if I contact you at that email address, you can give me more information?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will leave my cards with the city clerk for you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, David. I agree it was a very positive experience to learn and be trained about this. About 3 weeks ago, I was driving through town, came across over at Hamishaw and Dorothy, a young man lying in the street with his head in the gutter, bleeding from the head. And I stopped, pulled over, and asked the lady who was helping him, I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, I think he's drunk. He staggered on the sidewalk and staggered into traffic. I almost hit him, and then he fell backward and hit his head in the gutter." And I had not watched the video before that date. And she said, "I think he's drunk." And I said, "Well, I'm going to stay here with you until 911 gets here just in case." And knowing the symptoms now, I'm pretty sure he was having an overdose. You know, the pinpoint eyes, the slow breathing, not responsive to a knuckle kind of thing. There's things I know now that are helpful. I think if I had kids still in the house, I'd probably get Narcan, because you never know what somebody's bringing over to your house.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know. You think it's not going to happen to you or be in your circle, but it can. And you can't hurt them if you administer it.
Correct.
You're not legally liable if they pass away from the overdose anyway. It doesn't harm them if there's no opioids in their system. So I don't see the downside to having access and carrying this stuff. So I guess glad to hear you come and spread the word, because it seems to be getting much worse in terms of overdose deaths.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shore. I appreciate it. Graham, aren't all of our police officers now carrying Narcan?
Correct. We have it in all of our vehicles.
Great. That's important. All right. Second and last presentation is a redistricting update, and our senior management analyst, David Richards, will tell us about this. Hi, David.
Hey, how are you? Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Is the presentation up? Here we are. So today I'm providing an update about where we're at with the redistricting process and introducing the representatives from NDC, who's our redistricting consultant. To kind of quickly recap, during the May 25th City Council meeting, I provided a broad overview about the redistricting process and some of our next steps. These next steps included finalizing a contract with NDC, developing an outreach plan, determining hearing dates, and creating a website. These tasks have all been completed, with the exception of the website, which we're just waiting on mandatory translation before we get that live. So I believe they're with me tonight, our redistricting consultants, Dr. Doug Johnson, who's the president of NDC, and NDC consultant Shannon Kelly. Are they?
Hello.
I believe we're getting them online, so I can introduce them real quickly.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you and see you.
Oh, good. Great. Good to be here. Thanks for having us via Zoom.
Great, absolutely. And then, okay, we see Doug, you there as well. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So Shannon and Doug will be our experts, kind of guiding us through the process and ensuring that we get the demography services correct and also check all the boxes with the redistricting process. Is there anything you guys want to add tonight?
Doug, do you want to go first?
Sure. Just briefly want to say looking forward to working with you. As many of you already know, it was our real pleasure to work with the city on the first time through this. And many of you that have heard me speak at League of Cities and other events, I often refer to what a great process it was in El Cajon and how engaged the community got and how parts of the community that had rarely got involved before that process engaged and found it kind of fascinating and learned about their city. So we look to build on that and to hopefully have a very similar, very public, open and transparent and engaging process. Thank you very much. Shannon?
Hi there, I'm Shannon Kelly, and I am a consultant with NDC. I'm actually local to San Diego County and excited to be working with El Cajon. And I just have to say I've been engaged with Dave for a couple of weeks now and been very impressed at the speed at which this process has taken off and gotten to the point where, as you'll see from his presentation, we're really ready to engage the public. And it's been a great experience, and I think it will be a good one moving forward.
Great. Thank you both. I appreciate you joining us tonight. Let's see if I can. Okay, there we are. So as I mentioned earlier, the public hearing dates, times, and locations have been finalized. Our various locations were picked in the various districts, or all 4 districts that we currently have established. So our first public hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, July 14th at 6:30 p.m. at the Hillside Recreation Center. The second one is scheduled for Wednesday, September 9th at 6:30 p.m. at the Renette Recreation Center. Our third one is scheduled for Thursday, November 4th at 7 p.m. at the Kennedy Recreation Center. And our fourth and final public hearing will be scheduled for Saturday, January 22nd at 10:30 a.m. at the El Cajon Valley High School. As far as next steps, we're going to begin implementing our community outreach plan and host our public hearings, which we just went over the dates. Our first hearing is going to focus on communities of interest, and so kind of diving into the various commonalities that we have within our communities. And then our second hearing is going to roll out the online mapping tool so that residents can draft their own maps and submit draft maps for consideration. And with that, that concludes my update for tonight, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Let me see if there's any questions, David. Questions? You know, I had a lot of questions, but you answered them all. So it sounds like it's going to be almost identical to what we did the last time. And I was really happy with what we did last time. I thought it was fair and organized, and everybody got a chance to be heard. So hopefully it will go that smoothly this time. Looks like it will. Yeah.
So what are the plans for advertising this and getting the community involved? What are your steps on that?
I mean, we have quite a few steps involved. Let me pull this out real quick just so I can reference it. We obviously are going to put out a press release and kind of reaching out to our local media partners, social media posts. We have a series of websites or web pages that we're putting up on our website in multiple languages. We'll have flyers, posters, banners at the facilities, and I'll be reaching out throughout this process to make presentations to local service groups. So it's pretty extensive outreach. It's a good first exercise for us to do a thorough outreach for a project, and so I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be effective.
And will you be keeping the council updated on those different flyers and whatever so that we can in turn get them out to the various social media groups that we're involved in ourselves?
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Great idea. All right, with that.
Thanks, David.
Great, thanks.
All right, we're now at consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any consent items? I'd like to pull consent item 4 just for a question. And staff, do you wish to pull any consent items?
No, sir.
All right, as for consent item 4, it's talking about the AEDs. Do Do you have any idea how many AEDs we currently have and how many we'll have after this allocation, and what the training's been like for staff to be ready to act if that moment ever comes?
Certainly, I'll invite our fire department to come and address those questions.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Winowski, Division Chief with Heartland Fire and Rescue, and I am overseeing the EMS and admin part of the fire department. Just to reference your question, these are not the AEDs that we see in the public buildings. These are the defibrillator heart monitors that we use for patient care.
Forgive me, then I have no question for you.
Okay.
I thought it was the different AED. So.
No.
Okay,
Do you have any questions while I'm here?
Carry on, save lives.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then. Angela, do we have any comments for consent items?
We received no comments, sir.
All right, then, with your permission, I make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, that brings us then to public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions. An item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do you have any speaker cards for public comment?
We do, sir. We have one, and it's gentleman in the public, David Whelan.
Hello, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is David Weiland, and I am here to not necessarily discuss a topic, but this is in relation to a topic that just got approved on the consent calendar. But I would like to take this opportunity to let you know, because I know as a developer, the only time usually the mayor, council, or city manager hear from us, it's for two reasons, and that's either to complain about staff or process or to ask for a favor. So I'm going to kind of turn the other way this time, and I want to let you know that we had a situation and asked for some help from staff, and several staff members, I'll name them here, but John Phillips, Jaime Campos, Spencer Hayes, Andre Sanchez, Tony Shute, and Morgan Foley basically went above and beyond and out of the way and completed some items in 4 working days that we're typically used to, 2 months, maybe 3 sometimes. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to recognize staff, because I know a lot of times they don't get recognized, and just let you guys know that they just did an exceptional job for us. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for taking your time.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I was coming here anyways to keep an eye on the item, but still.
Okay. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, then. No more
comments, sir.
Make a motion then to close the public comment. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right. There are no written communications on today's agenda. Okay. Now, what's our status?
Mr. Mayor, I just received a notice from Mr. Ortiz. He may not make it. He's still waiting to get here, so he recommended we proceed without him. And we can do that.
Okay, then. We are now at public hearings. We have one item to consider. Item 9 is the fiscal year 2021 through 2022 annual City Housing Authority and successor agency budgets. And staff, would you please tell us about this?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, Mr. Clay Shane, our city's finance director, will present the report.
Clay, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. My name is Clay Shane. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of El Cajon. Very happy today to continue the discussion of the FY22 proposed annual budget. Picking up where we left off at the last council meeting, today's presentation will briefly touch on the budget process again, just so we're all clear on what the action before you is today. Additionally, we will update you on changes to the proposed fiscal year 22 annual budget. In response to a question of Councilmember Goebel, we will bring you back up to speed on the pension obligation bonds that were issued earlier this fiscal year, as well as conducting our public hearing and addressing any questions or discussion necessary. The budget process usually begins in the spring with our long-term planning document or 5-year business plan. Based on that, we will develop a budget strategy with the input of the City Council and at the direction of the City Manager. From that, the individual departments will prepare their proposals for the following year. From there, we will review, compile, and balance the budget and present that document to the City Council for initial consideration. That is where we met last on the 8th. Today we pick up at that same point for any additional questions the City Council may have, and we will also submit the document for your adoption today. Everything going as planned, this is the budget that will take effect at the beginning of our fiscal year, which is July 1st. This is a graphic that we presented at the last meeting. However, we have updated it for a change that I will get to in just a moment. This is a total spending plan of approximately $191.4 million citywide. The largest component of that is our city's general fund, which as proposed is $83.7 million and by far the largest component of the budget. This is the city's primary operating fund, and this is what houses most of the governmental activities you're familiar with: police, fire, public works, things like that. Additionally, the city has approximately $43.1 million of activity proposed in our special revenue funds, $12.2 million of additional spending in our capital project funds, $9.1 million in our single debt service fund, which is servicing our pension obligation bonds, $30.8 million in our wastewater enterprise fund, as well as $12.3 million proposed in our internal service funds. This is the same information we presented at the last meeting. However, at the time it was presented as a pie chart representing our FY22 anticipated revenues. Just to change things up a little bit here, I have included our FY20 actuals as well as our estimated FY21 results against the proposed 22 revenues. Couple things to point out here. Most of the story is the top two lines, sales tax and the Proposition J sales tax. You can see where it has surprisingly held flat between the two fiscal years, as well as the estimated growth into 22. That is driving the bottom line activity, where you can see the softening in most of the other categories, where we see the total revenues decline from approximately $78 million down to about $75.7 million in the current fiscal year. But we're anticipating a very strong rebound next year of up to $83.6 million, driven by the recovery in the sales tax performance. This slide, kind of the same approach, deviating from the pie chart we showed last time. This compares the individual functions of the general fund for FY20 actuals, the FY21 amended budget, and the FY22 proposed budget. The one trend here I would like to point out between FY20 and 21 is, as a result of the impacts of COVID-19, we see most of these budgets are relatively flat year to year. This is an area that the city should be very proud of. This represents being able to hold city services fairly stable despite our challenges financially during that period. The differences at the bottom line is largely driven by The activity you see in the other financing sources line, that is, of course, the $2 million transferred to the PARS fund, as well as the $3.2 million transfer to the CIP fund. For FY22, we anticipate total expenditures of $83.7 million in the general fund. This is, for the most part, consistent with what we presented at the last meeting. However, there has been one modification of these numbers. The police department budget has been revised to include approximately $100,000 for additional training in the areas of de-escalation, as well as the use of less than lethal force. This activity taken together is detailed on our estimated FY21 results. Because of the proposed or discussed use of fund balance for that purpose, we see that proposed expenditures exceed estimated revenues by that $100,000, which represents a use of reserves. And we see together fund balance decline from $42.2 million at the beginning of the year to an estimated ending fund balance of $42.1 million. Changing topics and moving to a very significant activity earlier in the year, the city issued pension obligation bonds this spring. This was a significant action taken to address the city's $207 million unfunded pension liability with CalPERS. The city issued $147.2 million of bonds that had an average cost of interest of 2.84%. What's significant about this rate and kind of underline the whole purpose of these bonds is this effectively or conceptually was taking debt we owed CalPERS to pay retiree benefits that we're paying an interest cost of 7%, and we are able to borrow money through the issuance of these bonds at 2.84%. So the difference in those two rates represents significant savings. Precisely, the projected savings that this generates is $104.7 million for the city over the term of the bonds, and leaves us with a remaining unfunded liability of $55.6 million. These are all topics that we will revisit in the fall. Along with the issuance of POBs, the City Council adopted a pension funding policy that required us to return to Council in the fall to speak specifically on this subject, and we will return, as I said, in the fall. This slide is a chart that was prepared by the city's municipal advisor, Urban Futures, presented earlier this year as part of the issuance of the pension obligation bonds. Honestly, I expected the numbers to read a little bit bigger when they were on the big screen, so I apologize for the fine print. But I'll summarize this way. In the center, there is a column with blue ink that's titled POB Debt Service, and that is exactly what the name implies. That's how much we pay every year to service the bonds. So we borrowed $147 million, and over the life of the bonds, we will pay total debt service costs of principal and interest of approximately $200 million. However, what that money was used for was to extinguish the debt with CalPERS of the balances in the gray column, which were the layers of debt that the bonds paid off. And those total payments were $305 million we were looking at. The difference between the two is the column on the right of the pink, which details out the $104.7 million. Specifically, Councilmember Goebel's question was how much of an impact this had on the annual budget. And for FY22, it was not as significant as what we will see in later years. And a lot of that had to do with just how we applied those monies. The top line there for FY22 shows that we saved approximately $500,000 in FY22, but we very rapidly see that number increase over the next 2 or 3 years as we get into the deeper layers of those debt. In fact, you can see that there are years there that are approaching $7 million, and then finally the one rather large year of $1 million out in the future. So it does have an impact this fiscal year, but it will get better as the years go on. At the conclusion of our public hearing, we will ask the City Council to take 3 recommended actions, and we ask that that is done via 3 separate motions representing one each of the 3 entities that this budget represents. First of which is acting as the City Council. We ask that the City Council adopts the 3 resolutions, including the adoption of the annual budget, the adoption of the annual appropriations limit, as well as the designation of general fund balances. Then we ask that, acting as the Housing Authority Board of Directors, we propose that you adopt the resolution adopting the annual budget for that entity. And lastly, acting as the successor agency to the former Redevelopment Agency Board of Directors, we propose that you adopt the resolution adopting its annual budget for FY22. So with that, I conclude my comments and would be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Clay. Appreciate that. Questions? I imagine there's quite a few.
Can we go back to the general fund expenses by department? Okay, so I'm kind of comparing the column on the right, 2021 budget that we're looking to approve with, I'm going to call it the pre-pandemic budget of FY19 and 20, since that's kind of outside of the pandemic. So I see the police at 38.1 million before the pandemic and 41.4 after the pandemic. On the surface, it looks like a $3 million increase, but aren't we just restoring positions that were left vacant through attrition, attrition, retirements, things like that? We're not necessarily ramping up with a lot of new staff. We're restoring freezes, things like that. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, and that is a trend we see not just in the police department, but because it is the largest department in the city, you see it in a more pronounced way. But that is true for every function presented there. Realistically, the increase you see across the board between years really conceptually should be a little bit hypothetically for FY21 and the rest for FY22. So in a lot of ways, that's a 2-year increase, even though it appears to be the single year. And it is driven in part by the restoration of some of the mitigation efforts we put into place to balance the 21 budget.
Okay, good point. On Public Works, the opposite, the kind of 9.1 million pre-pandemic, but now 8.9 million, a lower amount post-pandemic. Is that because we're outsourcing more things? Or are we not restoring things? The public would say, oh man, don't let your city fall apart.
No, I'm glad you brought that to the public's attention. And there is a small influence of outsourcing some minor services, but most of that change in what appears to be a decrease is the shifting of attention of public works staff from general fund activities to the wastewater activities. If we had a similar presentation, you would see a slightly greater increase for the wastewater fund as we allocate more staff and resources to support that activity.
Okay. So I think the public would say, just make sure you don't let your streets and neighborhoods fall in disrepair because you're working on this future project, the wastewater fund, things like that.
Absolutely.
That's probably what the public would say to us. Otherwise, the pension obligation fund is great news. That's all I have.
Michelle? A couple questions. In past years, we talked about the increase in our obligations to CalPERS that we're going to go up. I believe the number was 5 million one year and then 10 the next and 15 after that. Does these pension obligation bonds change that?
It does change it. It influences it greatly. There's two components that, or multiple components, but there is the increase each year in that liability driven by the interest charged to the unpaid debt from the previous years. There's also the impact of investment losses, changes in actuarial practices, and things like that. Those types of influences will continue to occur, and there's really not a whole lot that we can do except address them as they occur. But by paying off the unfunded liability, or a big chunk of it, we're reducing the interest they charge on that.
Yeah, that's my next question is, now that we're down to relatively small amount of $55.6 million for the unfunded balance, what's our chances of amortizing that over 10, 15 years and being done with that?
I guess the best way to say that is it kind of depends on what CalPERS does for the next 10 or 15 years. In theory, the way that works is the annual payment is that very thing. It's the total unfunded liability divided by the number of years that's being amortized and being paid off over time. So in theory, if nothing else changes, there will be a point where we reach zero. But every year they reevaluate, and sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. It's just the nature of pension accounting.
I assume there will be no changes, but
That would be nice.
if that were to be the case, when would you expect that we would be out of debt in that respect?
While he's thinking about that, remember the council authorized a certain amount of POBs to be issued, and we only issued 75% of that. So there's still 25% of authorized POBs that we can still go out on the market and sell. So that number may come down again, but we're still watching the market. I think with Mr. Shane, and I'll let him answer the question, but their market and, the bond market and the PERS market are always moving, right? And so knowing when to drop the ball is pretty critical. But we'll always have, to a certain degree, some unfunded liability just from year to year.
So the Fed's saying they're going to increase interest rates, I think, 3 times in the next 2 years? How will that affect our pension obligation bonds and the ability to get back into the market and pay off some of these other debts?
We haven't analyzed that yet, and we're working. We're getting through the end of this fiscal year. We'll see what PERS did in terms of their performance, and then we'll get back with our our financial analysis.
I appreciate it. I'm just curious. It's an interesting thing, but it's a lot of moving parts, huh, Clay?
Indeed.
Thanks for your...
Speaking of retirements and unfunded liability, am I right in thinking that you never really need to be 100% caught up with unfunded liabilities, because the unfunded liabilities carry so far out into the future, including for today's workforce, that if you were to prepay the future obligations that aren't yet due, you could be using that money for other things today?
I would say that is the prevailing opinion, yes, sir.
Kind of like, why pay off your whole home mortgage now when you could be using the money for other things and getting the tax deduction for your things along the way, as long as you manage your money right?
Correct. I think there's very few people that would propose the best financial management would be 100% funded. I think most would probably, and there's a variety of opinions out there. Some may say as low as 80%, some may say as high as 90%, maybe even higher than that. But I think you're precisely on point that if you have committed to 100% funding, you're effectively paying earlier than you really need to, and that money could be put to other uses. I think most people feel that a pension fund that is funded that well is being well managed and is in good shape.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Clay. Appreciate that. Welcome. Angela, any speaker cards on this?
No comments were received, sir.
Okay, then I still need to make a motion then to close the public hearing. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Well, first, one statement. I'm really impressed with our whole economic management team, and I feel like we're in good hands. Is there any more discussion, or somebody like to make a series of motions?
I'll make some motions if I can get the crib sheet back up, since it's... Okay, I'd like to move that we adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 annual budget and adopt the annual appropriations limit for same fiscal year and approve the designation of the general fund balances.
Second. All right, please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right.
And then the next one, these need to be 3 separate motions, right, Mr. Foley? Okay. So, so I move that we adopt the resolution of the El Cajon Housing Authority budget for 21-22.
Second.
Vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
And finally, City Council successor to the former acting as a former successor agency for the redevelopment agency, we adopt the 21-22 budget.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Thank you, Steve. All right. We're on to administrative reports. We have 4 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 10 is regarding the American Rescue Plan Act appropriations and updates. I'll ask our city manager to please introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. As you recall, at your last meeting, staff presented some possible projects that could benefit from the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the city's due to receive, and that's about $30 million over. We've already received one tranche of it, and we'll receive the next year. Staff sought council feedback on those ideas and was directed to bring those back formally for consideration. So that's what we're doing this afternoon. Staff will present in just a moment 15 specific projects that we believe fulfill the needs of the city, but also are eligible under the ARPA plan. So as you recall, we did present some 6 different criteria that we think that will help the council and help staff determine what's the best bang for the buck and how to make the most of this one-time money. We also identified the categories that are found in the American Rescue Plan Act. As you recall, one of them, we're not recommending that we you have any programs under the premium pay for essential workers, but all the other programs or categories have programs or projects within those. I should note that since the staff report was published, U.S. Treasury Department has come out with some new regulations and new guidelines and some new reporting requirements. We're still in the process of understanding what those requirements are. One of those requirements is to present a spending plan, sometime by August of this year. So there's some value in moving forward. We have a feeling that some of the things that may be on this list, one in particular, may not be found eligible, but there's some value in at least presenting it to Treasury and having them opine of whether it's a project that can move forward or not. And so there's some value in presenting these sooner than later to Treasury. And so if we need to pivot or make a change, we can do that sooner rather than 6 months before the money is due to be spent. So with that, I'll just walk through quickly the projects that staff has identified that we would recommend the council appropriate money toward. One of the categories is responding or mitigating COVID efforts. We've relied on FEMA funding and other funding from the state and from the federal government for much of the mitigation effort. We still think there's about $1 million of reimbursement that we're due for mitigation. And then we're also, the council allocated $100,000 towards reducing vaccine barriers, and I'll address what we've done on that so far. There's also an opportunity to replace lost revenue because of the pandemic, with businesses reducing their revenue had an impact on the city. As you recall, that money just can't be captured and put back into our coffers and sit into our bank account. It has to be reinvested. And so staff would recommend we reinvest that in city infrastructure that typically doesn't get funded from year to year. So looking at programs that will help us generate revenue or save money in the future, which we can then put back into the general fund and pay for community services makes sense, such as a solar or a battery project program. And then also upgrading the city's cybersecurity and the city's networking equipment, we think has a lot of value. Again, that's been a project that has sort of year after year gone neglected, and we think this is an opportunity to give it some attention. We also know that the funds can be used for infrastructure projects. We would recommend that we expand the city's current broadband system, which will potentially get higher speed internet services to a lot of our disadvantaged communities, but also gives the city an opportunity to lease that space to private companies. So again, a revenue generation for the city that we can reinvest back into the services that we provide our community. And then there's a whole slew of projects and programs relating to directly assisting households and businesses, from street beautification to the small business grant program that I'll report on in a second, to creating cool zones and evacuation site upgrades at our recreation centers, typically in some of our more disadvantaged areas of the city. Public improvements, which is a big economic development boost program that will entice development to come into the city and have a lasting impact for jobs and beautification. Additional park amenities such as pickleball and soccer courts and other types of things. The Dollar Days programs, which I'll report on in just a minute. An opportunity to explore a model of using social workers to respond to emergencies rather than police officers. This is as you recall, this is something that's discussed regularly in a theoretical sense all over the United States. Here's an opportunity to allocate a little bit of money to see if that solution has value. And if it doesn't, then we know. And if it does have value, that would free up some enormous amount of our officers' times to respond to other incidents in the city. Business license program, I'll report back on that in a second. Working with a firm to help us do a really strategic plan, economic development study plan that will help us identify what our assets are, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are from an economic development perspective, and what areas we should be prioritizing our efforts. And then last, the El Cajon Food Fest, which I'll report on in a minute as well. We think there's, as we present these, we recognize that there are opportunities to change. So if the council were to adopt the resolution appropriating monies to these, there's opportunities to move funds around. There's opportunities for the council to reappropriate money to other projects. We're developing a list of other projects that could fill in if some of these don't work out, or if we don't end up spending as much money as staff is projecting. I'll give you a few examples. We currently are engaging with a really innovative program with the County of San Diego and with Padre Dam, and part of that program is to provide clean water will require a significant amount of sewer money that our ratepayers will be paying into. And so there's an opportunity to use some of these funds to help offset some of those expenses to our ratepayers. We're also just noticing greater danger to our community and to our city staff as we go into channels and clean the tunnels from homeless encampments with booby traps and other very dangerous conditions that we're creating for our workforce. And so another option would be to consider developing and spending, which is not a cheap fix, but a great system that would protect those tunnels from being inhabited. So we're exploring that as a potential backup project. And then Helix Water District recently sent, at least me and I believe the mayor, maybe other council members, or you may be receiving it soon, a letter requesting $3 million for a water project. So I think there's going to be some demand on these funds in the future. I think there's some value in establishing how you want to spend or allocate the money now. And then once that money's been allocated, you can go back and move things around from time to time. And I do plan on reporting back on a regular basis how these monies are being spent. So there's opportunities at least once a month or once every other month to start reconsidering how to use these monies. So with that, let me just walk through quickly some of the projects that we currently have, that the council has currently allocated or appropriated monies for. Council has appropriated $5 million for a small business grant program. As of today, we've received 81 applications. 52 have been awarded grants in a total amount of $708,000. So still, it's moving slowly, but we're actually seeing some pickup in some areas, and we've actually developed a new marketing program that we're going to be pushing out in days to come. We're still working through the logistics of the business license assistance program. In terms of reducing barriers to those that want to receive vaccines, we've assisted with several local city events or community events. We've supported those events with gift cards and refreshments and water. We've done those at churches and at schools. We are currently staffing a hotline, so when people call with questions about where to find a vaccine, and by the way, navigating the 211 system isn't always the easiest, so we're sort of augmenting that as an opportunity for our residents. So that's been a big benefit to our community. We have a website that's updated weekly with the latest locations where vaccines can be found. And then we continue to work with Meals on Wheels, Elder Help, and the County of San Diego to identify homebound seniors that don't have the ability to get out, and we can figure out ways to bring vaccines to them. In terms of dollar days, so far 788 residents have registered for recreation programs through the program. This is going to cost us an estimated almost $66,000. That does not include $50,000 that we've allocated for senior day trips. And so we're still well within that $700,000 mark, but I think as we expand a swimming program through the school district's pools, I think we'll get more money out and more recreation opportunities out, and I think we'll get close to spending that $700,000. And if we don't, as you recall, we can always push that program out for years to come. And then lastly, we continue to work with the Chamber of Commerce and the downtown business partners and with St. Madeleine's, Sophie's to work on the Food Fest, which is going to occur on September 18th. So it's going to be a really fantastic day, a great way to bring the community together, but a really great way to help a lot of our small businesses, our restaurants in particular, and our catering companies. So it will be a real boost to their bottom line. So with that, staff's here to answer any questions about existing projects that have been money's been allocated toward, or to answer any questions about the resolution that you see before you that would appropriate monies to the 15 projects that have been identified.
Thank you, Graham. Questions?
So the first thing you said was we got our first half of the $30 million in a tranche recently, so that's something we've received?
Yeah, we received about a little over $14 million in money that's sitting in an account right now.
Okay. My question there is, can we be a little more aggressive with that money in perhaps making it earn some money while we're waiting to spend this money? We've got $43 million in reserves, which we typically keep at a very safe 0.01 interest or something like that. So we've got our reserves, and while we're waiting for this $14 million to be spent, can we be 1% interest on this money to try to make some money?
I can't commit to that, but that's something that we can certainly explore tomorrow.
That kind of makes sense to...
Because we're not going to spend all 14 next week.
And we've got the reserves in case we have a cash call today for all the $5 million in business grants. So that's my first request, is that we look to maximize the use of that money. I don't know if the government allows you to earn interest on the ARP money, but that would be a great thing to do. Do we have cyber insurance? You talked about cybersecurity. We do have cyber insurance.
I'm looking at Ms. Diaz, and she's shaking her head. I do recall in our last round of insurance that was a big issue. And I'm looking at Mr. Richards, too, that manages our insurance. So, and he's nodding yes as well.
Okay, that's good. Most people would probably say it's a matter of when, not if, public agencies are going to get attacked. The broadband, does that provide free Wi-Fi for, I'll say, disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city?
It opens up that opportunity. It doesn't do that. That's a whole nother expenditure and realm and a management issue. This gets us, one, it connects our remote city facilities with our own network, which is a big impact for us, especially if we're relying on more technology, video surveillance. it also gives us the revenue opportunity, but it does give us the opportunity to expand the ability to provide that, or to work with a provider to provide free internet or free broadband to our residents. But that does not necessarily do that. This project would not do that.
Okay, so I think the public would like to know, what are some of your ideas on how to make money off of that?
We would lease it to a company that would otherwise install their own fiber, and then we would lease them conduit space or fiber space.
Okay. The $500,000 for the social worker program, I'm going to heavily ask you to depend on the police department for guidance with the social worker program. It's such a hot topic that we really don't want anybody in danger, whether that is a resident, whether that is a social worker, whether that is a police officer. So whatever we do with that money has to lower the danger and better use resources. If there's a chance for a police officer not to respond to a call, that's a win, probably for everybody. So we got to be really smart with that money. The leftover money or unallocated money that could go to the Advanced Water Purification Project, one of the benefits there is it could soften or lower future wastewater price increases to ratepayers.
Absolutely.
So that's a win there. On the small business grant, I guess I'm at the point that I would open this up if you think it's time to do that, to say, you know what, the idea to restrict it to capital improvements and employees was good, but we're nowhere near $5 million, and why don't we at least make sure somebody's showing a receipt for a window fix or some kind of business expense rather than a blank check. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think from a policy perspective, I do worry about, here we implemented a program. We made 81 businesses jump through some hoops and apply it a certain way. I do worry about those 81 businesses and how they would feel about, now we're just giving away money. I think you're right, Mr. Goebel, that there are opportunities, and we're already doing it actually, reducing some of the barriers that we currently have in play. I still think there's some more outreach that we need to do before we completely open it up. And I think some businesses are still trying to figure out what their needs are. Or have already hired people, and so they don't need to hire more people, and it'd be hard to go retroactive and look at that. So I would ask the council be a little patient with us. We have several years to work through this. This will have opportunities to help businesses as they figure out their new normal and stabilize a little bit and figure out what their real capital needs are. I would hate for a business to use this money to buy something just to buy something capital-wise. They don't really need it. I'd rather have them go a little slower and figure it out. Will have their biggest bang for their buck.
I think the deadline for the grant says August 3rd, so we might need to blow that open. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe. I think that's right.
And for that, last time we did this last year, $2.7 million, we had 163 grants issued. So we're halfway there in terms of applicants, but nowhere near the dollars, so to speak.
Yeah.
So to the 81 businesses who did, I would say, well, you locked in your money early when there wasn't necessarily known that it was going to be this much available. You locked in yours early, so I don't have a problem with that. I would like to throw open the idea, and this falls under one of the new state laws regarding environmental justice. And perhaps there's some money in there, maybe it's unallocated money that could be at your discretion, to do some of the cleaning around town. I was down on Main Street in the downtown area. There's a lot of sidewalks that just need to be power washed because it hasn't really rained much for 2 or 3 years, and we've had many encampments on sidewalks, and many things are left over on the sidewalks now. And I think to address this environmental justice component, kind of a cleaning, power washing wouldn't be too expensive, would benefit everybody.
I think you're right. I mean, the street beautification and safety projects, most of those are intended to be capital projects, but there's also programmatic opportunities to do improvements. We talked about repairing sidewalks and things like some smaller things, but I think part of that could include the deep cleaning that is needed in some places of our city. And it would have to be I would recommend some of our lower census tract neighborhoods.
Lower census and commercial areas, and areas where we know that there have been encampments on sidewalks. So there's data on that kind of stuff. Thank you.
So,
Okay, I'm kind of going to be bouncing around here, sorry. All right, so on the safety projects, you were talking about maybe looking into getting grills or grates over the, what do you call it, the drainage?
The drain channels?
Yeah. Is there any way that we can work with the county on that? Because some of our areas merge into county, and then county merges into city. You know, it sort of flows in and out because of the way our lines are. And is there any way that we can work with them and do it as a joint project?
Perhaps. I think there's not enough money to put grates on every channel in the city. There's so many openings.
Right.
So we would be focusing our attention on the areas that were the most problematic. If there were areas that had a drainage channel that opened up, let's say on the county side, then also opened up on the city side, we would have to work with them somehow just for even the maintenance aspect. So that would be something we'd work with. We know that the county's done similar projects to what we're talking about in Lakeside. So this is not a foreign idea to them. So this is something they have already done and something that we would work with them.
Well, there are some areas that are completely open. It's not necessarily like just an opening where you can put a grate on. I mean, over by Graves and Hart, I believe that is county area, but I mean, the homeless have cut the county locks off and put their own locks on there. And so I was just kind of wondering if that's something that can be mitigated with these funds.
I'm not familiar with that, and these would be things that the types of grates that you just can't open with a lock. These would be pretty industrial.
Okay, moving on. On the business grant program, what kind of outreach are we doing with businesses?
Good question. So we've done some social media on it, and frankly, that's not really reaching a lot of businesses, but
Right.
we thought it was important to do that. We actually sent a direct email to every business that has a business license. So if you have a business license, you received a direct marketing email from the city of El Cajon. We've worked with the chamber, and we're continuing to work with the chamber to get the word out to them. The thing that we're going to be doing now is we're developing kind of a postcard. And as we interact with people all day long, businesses all day long, whether it's code enforcement, our police officers, our fire department, we're in and out of businesses all the day. We're going to carry this with us and encourage businesses to apply. So a real direct approach method.
Okay. Let's see. The next one is on mitigating the vaccine barriers. Since starting our vaccination sites, and like, what has been the increase in people getting vaccinated? So I know that we've started having different events around town. Have we seen an increase in people getting vaccinated, or is it sort of just leveled out?
I mean, I can tell you that people are attending these events. I attended an event with my son in El Cajon, so I know there's people there. I saw an event earlier today, and there was about 4 people there. So I think there is a bit of a petering out of the demand.
And does anybody know why? I mean, if the government, and maybe this isn't the conversation for this council, but if the government is making, all the commercials and all the advertising for people to be vaccinated, and we're doing, as a city, we're doing everything we can to get people vaccinated, but people are not showing up, what do we do?
I could speculate, but I don't think that's our realm of responsibility.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Michelle, I think what it is that people have made up their minds. And so we have a diminishing returns about people who are undecided. I think everybody at this point has decided, and so that's why they're trying to give incentives to people to get the vaccinations,
Right.
like free Xboxes and stuff. And they may get some people to do it as a result of that, but I think you're going to see declining returns.
Okay. My next question is on the broadband. We talked about broadband, but can you explain to me a little bit, what does it do? What does that entail?
It's really the infrastructure. So when someone has internet service in their home, right, there's a wire that connects their home, and a lot of times it's just a cable. And so depending on how big that cable is, tells you it's almost like a pipe. The fatter the pipe, the faster the speed, right? And so broadband or fiber optic is one of the higher speeds, and so we would put that network in a lot of parts of the city, connecting our facilities with sort of this area right here, and then that would just give us more capacity to feed off of in the future, and then to sell that capacity to those that need it for commercial purposes.
Okay, so like in District 2, in my end of town, we can only get Cox Cable. And you can't get AT&T in that area, or you can, but you can't get the speed that Cox Cable would provide. Is that something where if we were to increase our broadband system, that would help that for people would give people more choices?
Theoretically, if a company like an AT&T wanted to rent our fiber optic line and then provide it to customers, that would give them an opportunity, a market opportunity.
Okay. All right, and let's see, on the social worker.
But I am reminded, there are some exclusive franchises. So that there are some prohibitions of that, but it does open up the market opportunity.
Okay. As far as the social worker component of this, are we working on a plan? Do we have a plan being put together now so that if it gets approved, we can hit the ground running?
We have done no work on this.
Okay.
I have 3 articles that I've pulled up that I'm going to read, but I wasn't going to waste my time reading them until I knew what this vote was going to be. So once it happens, I'm going to do a little bit of research. It's going to, and Mr. Goebel, you're exactly right. It's not going to emanate from the city manager's office. We don't know policing. It will occur at the police level. You should be aware that we have been in touch before any of this, working potentially a pilot program with UC San Diego and their clinical psychology program to see if there's an opportunity for them to get some exposure to life on the street, working with the police department. So we've been having these discussions, but not at this next level. So depending on where the council goes, we'll start working on it.
I think that's a great idea to work with, a school and maybe partner a seasoned social worker with a student. Someone who's, basically at the end of their schooling to kind of introduce this component to them. So the next one, can we use the money for power boxes? So like at Mollison and Broadway, where we had the car accident at 7-Eleven and the electrical box is gone, or maybe it was Greenfield and Mollison, one of the two, where we had to kind of search around and look for a box. Can we use funds to buy some reserve boxes? Because it seems like lately we have had a lot of accidents, a lot of electrical outages. Citizens are extremely upset about the traffic issue, and sometimes it's hard to see those four-way stops, the flashing red lights. From what I hear on the on social media, that there have been additional accidents because of the four-way stops. Can we buy in reserves so that we don't have to search around and look for them?
I wouldn't recommend that. Those boxes are really ongoing operational expenses.
Okay.
And I think we should think about using these monies sort of for one-time big projects,
Okay.
not sort of ongoing things. But yeah, finding them are a difficult thing. And we usually have a few on reserve, but we've had a freak number of accidents, and
Right.
we've depleted those reserves.
Well, I was just kind of wondering if that's something that could be part of the capital improvement or something. It just sort of gives us a little edge so that we're not having to wait 2 weeks or even a week. I mean, honestly, I think what I hear from a lot of people is that, it impacts them tremendously. They don't know, maybe they're not on social media, they're not hearing all the road closures, and then with 8 and 67 repairs being done at the same time, we've had accidents on city streets or on the surface streets. Now you've got it from both sides, and people are going, what's going on? So it was just an idea. Thank you.
Great. I know you haven't even started looking at the social worker program. Just one thought is there's a great study out of Sacramento where one of the hospitals in Sacramento used a program like this to hire a couple social workers and go out and see frequent users of the hospital, and they preemptively help these people form a strategy that helped them not to use the hospital as much, saved them like $8 million. It was an amazing program. Maybe something like that where we could take a look at our high utilizers of police help and send social workers out to go help them create a strategy that would give them a better outcome. But I'm sure the police department knows exactly what they're doing.
I'll add, not just the police department, but the fire department as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure they encounter frequent flyers, if I can use that term, to people. They say, how about we send a social worker to say, maybe we need to educate you on the use of the 911 system, and here's an alternative source, but a PACE program, something like that.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Okay. Well, do you have all the information then you need, Graham, to move forward with this?
Yes, and I am making a recommendation. Oh, this would probably help, huh?
Let me see if there's any comments here from Angela.
No comments were received, sir.
So, Mr. Mayor, I do have a recommendation that the council adopt the resolution as included in the agenda package that would appropriate funds to these 15 projects.
All right. I'll make a motion to do that, as Graham has outlined. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Okay, the second administrative report, item 11, is for the compensation for executive and unrepresented employees, A29. City manager and the city attorney. I'll ask staff to please introduce this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. I am Marisol Thorne, the Director of Human Resources for the city. The item before you represents proposed changes for the city manager's contract, the city attorney's contract, and city council policy A29, which covers the compensation and benefits for executive staff as well as unrepresented employees. The general changes are a 2.5% cost of living increase for all employees represented, and also an increase of $50 a month for the cafeteria plan starting in January of 2022. There are also other changes as stated in the agenda report, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thanks. I appreciate that, Marisol. Any questions? No. All right. Well, thank you, Marisol. We're finished. I have to apologize to everybody in advance. I have to read a very, very long statement, so I warned you. First, I need to state that the California law requires that prior to taking final action on the salaries, salary schedules, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits of what are known as, quote, local agency executives, unquote, the legislative body shall orally report a summary of a recommendation for such a final action. A local agency executive includes any employee of the city who is not subject to the Myers-Millis-Brown Act and who is the city manager, the assistant city manager, a department head, or whose position is held by an employment contract which includes the city attorney. So, for the purposes of disclosure, this report includes action on salaries and compensation in the form of fringe benefits for the following local agency executives. City Manager, Graham Mitchell. Assistant City Manager, Vince DiMaggio. City Attorney, Morgan Foley. City Clerk, Angela Cortez. Director of Community Development, Anthony Shute. Director of Finance, Treasurer, Cajon. Director of Human Resources, Marisol Thorne. Director of Information Technology, Sarah Diaz. Director of Public Works, Yasmin Ariano. Director of Parks and Recreation, Frank Carson. Fire Chief, Steve Swaney. And Police Chief, Michael Moulton. Now for the proposed changes. First, it is proposed that each of these employees receive a general salary cost of living increase of 2.5% effective January 12, 2021, with the Parks and Recreation Director receiving an additional salary adjustment of 8% in order to bring him closer to the median. Second, it is also proposed that each of these employees receive an increase in his or her salary, cafeteria benefits of $50 each month beginning in January of 2022, $1,300. I should note that the current benefit is $1,250 each month. As further compensation is proposed that the fire chief and the police chief each receive a non-personable stipend of $6,000, one half of which would be paid in July and the other half of which would be paid in December. Lastly, it is proposed that the police chief and the fire chief receive an increase in administrative leave hours from 80 to 140 hours per year. This concludes a summary of proposed changes to salaries and compensation in the form of fringe benefits to the city's executives, as is required by law. Now, before we move along, is there a report from the city manager on this matter?
No, there's not, although I think there should be a clarification. I think it was said that it was to be would be effective January 2021, but it should be July 2021.
The increases are June 12th, so it's a retro of this year, and the benefits will be in January.
Thank you for clarification. All right, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Next, I'd like to ask the City Council if you have any discussion before we ask for any comments from the public. Thank you. Now, Angela, do we have any speakers on this matter?
We have no speakers, sir.
All right. Is there any further discussion, or would someone like to proceed with a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the changes to City Council Policy A29 and that we adopt the next resolution to approve the amendments to the employment contracts with the city manager and city attorney, authorizing the mayor to execute the amendments.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right, the next administrative report, item 12, is for a City of El Cajon Parks Memorial Bench and a picnic table program. And I would like to ask Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Frank Carson, to come and tell us about all of this. Hi, Frank.
Mayor, City Council. I'm going to introduce Adam Tronerud in just a minute. He is our Parks and Recreation Manager that took on this project. He's done extensive research not only statewide but nationally on a park and picnic table, a park bench and picnic table memorial program. One part was in the initial phases of this. We also looked at tree dedication. We regularly get this request, and part of a national conversation, a national standard that people or agencies have been moving toward in the last 10 years is not doing a tree dedication program. The primary reason is trees, when a public agency plants a tree, it has about a 50% chance of surviving over a 10-year period. And it becomes a difficult situation when a family member sees a tree not make it, and becomes a bigger issue. So We are recommending to council to, right now at least, look at a bench and picnic table, a memorial program, and kind of see how that goes. And we can look at expanding beyond that after this initial phase. But I want to turn it over to Adam now.
Hi, Adam. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Council, and City staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. City of El Cajon Parks and Recreation Memorial Picnic Table Program, excuse me. This program is about giving citizens an opportunity to memorialize and commemorate their loved ones, organizations, or families. And as you can see here, this is actually a picture of the bench that we're going to be recommending for this program. The staff has standardized a bench and picnic table for placement in our parks, and we'll have predetermined locations, but staff will be happy to meet interested parties and agree upon a mutually agreed upon location. We understand that there are going to be times when there's something specifically special to someone that we would like to try to work with them on. So cost. The cost for the bench is going to be $2,000, and the picnic table is $3,000. And we work with Public Works staff to select products that will closely match the benches and picnic tables that we currently have, so that as we change them out, that it will look seamless in our parks. And they also have a long lifespan. So we're going with the one that was recommended by our Public Works department to maintain a long lifespan for something that's going to be special for that family member. The donation covers the cost of the equipment, installation, and a 5x10 commemorative plaque. And I'm just going to go back here for a quick second. As you can see on this, the commemorative plaque is in the middle here. And what's really nice about these types of tables and benches is that the company can make an inset so that the plaque goes right inside. It's less likely to be damaged or vandalized then and lasts a lot longer. And then we'll have standard verbiage for people to do in memory of or in honor of, just to kind of make sure that it's standardized out there. And this is a representation of the picnic table that we are recommending, and these are already here at Renette Park. And so I'm asking today that the City Council approves the City of El Cajon Parks and Recreation Memorial Bench Program, and I am very happy to answer any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Hi, Adam. How are you? What happens if a bench is vandalized or partially destroyed? Does the city have an obligation to restore it?
So what we have written into our application process that the city does determine like the length of the lifespan of the bench, but in a situation like that, we would absolutely repair if possible or restore and replace. This is something that would be very special for a family member or different organizations to do, so we would do that.
And that would be through whatever lifespan you say one of these things has?
That is correct.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Michelle? Are there any bench options that are less likely to encourage people to sleep on them?
The one that we chose looks really good for sleeping. Good point. But there are a lot of different things that we have issues out in the parks with. If they have armrests or if they have like a back to them, then they tend to be hanging points or staging points where people put tarps or different things if people are experiencing homelessness. So we find that even though this is something that people could sleep on, it is the least invasive.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right, let me see. Thank you very much for coming. Angela, any comments on this item?
No comments were received, sir.
All right, any further discussion, or somebody like to proceed with the motion?
I move that we approve the City of El Cajon Parks and Recreation Memorial Bench and Picnic Table Program.
Second.
All right, please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right. The last administrative report, item 13, is a COVID-19 status report, and I'll ask our city manager to update us on this.
Mr. Mayor, I just have three things to comment on this. One, we've been hovering around 1,000 active cases for a while. This is numbers that we were looking at last April. So we're really not seeing an increase in active cases in our county. I think we had one death in the last 8 or 9 days countywide that's COVID related. And I would recommend that we terminate the month or the weekly or biweekly or even monthly COVID action report. And if there's something that needs to be brought forward, I'll do that. So I'd recommend we take this off the agenda from this point on.
Well, I'm comfortable with that. Is the rest of the council code? You don't need a vote, right?
Don't need a vote.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the update, then, Graham. Let me see if Angela, did you receive any comments on this item?
No comments were received, sir.
All right. Then I'll move on to the commissioner reports then. There are no commissioner reports on today's agenda. Item 14 is my activities report. And we're now at the report of council members. Councilmember Goebel.
As stated.
Councilmember Mitchell.
As stated.
There are no general information items on today's agenda. There are no first or second readings of ordinance on today's agenda, and there are no closed sessions. So, this brings us to the adjournment, the adjourned regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency held this 22nd day of June 2021 is adjourned till Tuesday, July 13th, 2021 at 3 o'clock p.m. Thank you all very much. We'll see you then.